The World Eaters, formerly the 12th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes, and now a collection of war bands operating out of the Eye of Terror, are known as mindless butchers and savage animals, their primarch being the most mindless and most savage of them. Whilst this is an accurate description of them in the 41st millennium, the 31st millennium is a very, very different story. Starting with the Legion itself, before the arrival of Angron, the Legion did not engage in the mindless suicidal charges that it is typically depicted as doing in the 41st millennium. Rather, it was more akin to the Death Guard meeting the Night Lords, a mixture of slow, determined marches paired with terror tactics. For the World Eaters, the Warhounds, excuse me, as they were known then, would land upon a world and march slowly in formation, controlled and disciplined, not apprehensively, controlled. And the enemy, when faced with such a force, would have two responses. Either they would turn and run for fear of these transhuman creatures that seem to be so confident in their victory that they slowly march at fortified positions, or discipline would collapse and combat would begin in earnest without the organized, controlled fire that you would expect from an actual organized military, or something akin to what orcs would do and launch their own suicidal melee charge, of which the discipline of the World Eaters and the Fraternus Bond, the Warhounds, excuse me, would be on display. Man to man, fighting with his brothers on his right and his left in a phalanx, and when the phalanx fails, switching to chain axes to rip and tear the enemy, or chasing down fleeing foes and leaving their corpses as a mutilated display of why you should not resist the 12th. For they did not care how the war was done. It did not need to be clean, but rather it needed to be finished. They were not soldiers in their eyes, but rather they were weapons. They existed to conquer, and so they conquered. Angron is a very, very interesting character, in my opinion. For he was not meant to be a soldier, or rather, of the Primarchs, he was not meant to be the most soldierly. He was an empath, capable of understanding the feelings of others, and even transmitting their pain upon himself and alleviating it with mere proximity. Unfortunately, his role as presumably a diplomat or a leader of men would never occur, as he landed upon a world that did not cherish such a child. He was tossed into the slave pits of Nassaria, where his first real interaction with humans was being forced to climb over corpses and wounded men to avoid being drowned in acid. And when he finally had to interact with these people, his first interaction was trying to ease their pain and suffering as he killed them so that he would not die. Even in the base state of fight or flight, Angron at his earliest age did not wish to cause pain, and when he was forced to kill, did so in ways that minimized the suffering he inflicted. His time in the pit, fighting alongside other gladiators, launched him into forming fraternus bonds with the various gladiators, and in their deaths, he suffered. The pain and anguish of losing his family, as most of these gladiators were to him, would almost break him every single time. Further, there was no meaning to their existence, to their fighting, to their deaths, or so he thought. Because they were not fighting for glory, they were not fighting for honor, they were fighting for the entertainment of fellow slaves and of nobles who held them in bondage. Angron never had a choice that mattered in his life, until his father figure, Adepius, was put on the line, and he was told to kill him. Angron refused, and for this he was cursed with the butcher's nails, and in his savagery he killed his father figure. The one choice he ever had, to not murder the man he perceived as his father, was stolen from him. And in that moment he recognized in the universe that nothing mattered. Choices do not matter for men like Angron. For men that were not born of the High Riders, there is no choice. The only thing that matters in the end is how you die. And so Angron sought death in the form of an uprising. and failed to die. He and his fellow slaves would not have conquered Nuceria. They had not the numbers, they had not the weapons, they had not the popular support. They would have died in the wilderness, but they would have died as legends. The Emperor stole that choice from him. When presented with dying on the fields with his brothers and sisters, or living as a conqueror for a man he never knew, for a father he had never met before, Angron chose to die. That second choice was stolen from him, and he had to watch as his brothers and sisters were slaughtered and granted good deaths by the slave masters of Nuceria. He was thrust into a command position wherein he had to lead the now World Eaters, a position he never wanted. He was given an army he did not wish, and he was given a task he did not want: the oppression and suppression of the galaxy. He was to become a High Rider, and he loathed that. He loathed his legion because they could not understand him. Their attempts at calling him father infuriated him because he did not wish to be a father. He wished to be a brother. He did not wish to be above them. He wished to be their equal. They could never match that, however. And their inbuilt nature to seek his approval, to seek his fatherly love, drove them to serve him. And he tried to make them understand suffering and pain, perhaps even drive them to kill him. For as depicted in the book Slave of Nuceria, there was a time after Angron's recovery that he sought death. He abandoned his legion and went from death world to death world, fighting great megafauna and becoming worshipped by various human tribes as a red god. But nothing could kill him. Nothing even came close. So he returned to his sons, and he put up with them. And his sons, seeking to be like their father so that he would pay attention to them, so they would receive their father's love, attempted to acquire the butcher's nails, hoping and believing that that would give them the insight they need to understand him and thus be able to make him care about them. Some within the Legion saw that as foolhardy, viewed the nails as a poison. And in my humble opinion, they are half right. The nails for Angron are not a poison, but rather a drug. The nails let him fall into his anger. They allow him to forget the living world and just engage in brutal slaughter. When Angron is fighting, he can forget the pain of the world, can forget the fact that he does not matter in the cosmos, can forget the suffering inflicted upon him and his failings as a man. The nails are his opium. They are his cocaine. They are his heroin. They are his cannabis. And he granted them to his sons. Some sons, like Karn, understood. And at that point, Angron respected them and allowed them to be led by him. Ultimately, Angron is a man who does not wish to live. But if he is forced into living, he will do what he can to uphold his values, being that no man should be above another man. And that is why, ultimately, in my opinion, Angron resisted and eventually revolted against the Emperor alongside Horus and the other traitor Primarchs. It is not because he saw Horus as a better leader. It is not because he fell to the Chaos Gods at this time. It is not because he is a mindless savage. Rather, he felt that the Emperor's goal of the unification of the galaxy under him, under a High Rider, was a moral evil. And if Angron could not stop it, then at the very least he could die fighting against it. With his axes in hand, he would resist the ultimate High Rider, the God Emperor of mankind, or he would die trying. And ultimately, this desire to forget, this desire to lose himself, this desire to escape the pain that he was inflicted upon, and ultimately this desire to escape the pain, to escape the suffering inflicted upon him, to escape a universe that does not care about him and does not give him a choice. He was thrust into the arms of a demon. He was given unto the god of battle and rage, Khorne. And ultimately, He became what he hated most. He became a slave once again for an ultimate high rider. That is the story of the World Eaters. That is the story of Angron. Thank you for watching.